Hey guys, welcome back to my shitty little room where I don't have much of a backdrop or a good lighting setup, but I still record these rambly little videos every now and then in the meantime. I just finished writing my furry visual novel, or I guess I kind of finished writing it like about a week ago, and we're going to be going in for revisions in a few days. It's called 3 Days to Live, and it'll be available in probably about a week, at least like the game jam version of it will be. And we'll see if there's any further updates that need to happen before it's like something I call 1.0. I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. But I'm actually pretty proud of it. Like I did a read through of it a few days ago with the how it's all been programmed by Khan and everything, and it's like coming out pretty good. I think it'll be interesting to see how people react to that. But to sort of celebrate, I went and did a double feature today where I went to the theater and I watched Running Man, followed directly by Zootopia 2, mainly because I just heard Zootopia 2 was out. Not, like, I guess it's supposed to come out tomorrow, but it's already in theaters today. To the point where when I saw it in theaters, one of the trailers before Zootopia 2 was a trailer for Zootopia 2 saying to buy tickets now for the premiere tomorrow. But I'm already there watching it right now. So I don't know what's going on there. Don't really care. But it was very funny. So I have a somewhat unique relationship with Zootopia 1 in that I used to work at the Water Quality Control Board in a really depressing cubicle job. And I quit to do YouTube because my Patreon was getting big enough that me being able to do this, if you're confused because of this tiny channel being tiny, it's because I do other channels that are bigger than this one. I hit the point where I'm like, the amount of money I'm making from YouTube is catching up with how much money I'm making from this job. And it was this kind of scary thing of like, well, I went to college to get this job, and not to get this job, but this job's supposed to be some kind of career path to my post-college life, which wasn't necessarily like my calling or anything. It was just kind of like the series of decisions I kept making because I had to make something. I had to do some kind of choice about like, I guess I'll get this degree. I guess this is the career path. Like I wasn't particularly inspired by it. I was just I kind of was just aging and professionally needing to do something so I could have a future. But simultaneously, I was fucking around with YouTube stuff. And in the meantime, it just hit the point where I'm like, these two things are almost equal on income. And one of them is the thing that makes me miserable. And the other one is the thing that is very gratifying, obviously, because whatever, one way or another, there's a lot of downsides to YouTube, and I'll make a video about that at some point, I'm sure. But a real upside to YouTube is the fact that it is you, inescapably. Like, it's either your personality and your face, like moments like this, where it's just like your particular take or way of reacting to things is like the whole point of the thing. Or in other cases, it's your writing, like it's your creative input, your plan that goes into this big video. And that's a different kind of personality too. Like it's like your personality, but in a planned and canned kind of way, as opposed to like live reaction stuff. And given that I do video essays and let's plays, I do both. But both of those things are really fulfilling in different ways, because it, like, one way or another, whatever amount of success comes from it is ultimately yours. Like that's, even if there's like algorithms or whatever, there's people like ultimately liking you for you, and that's like very interesting to grapple with, especially if you're not used to the idea that anyone really likes you and so on. So all the way back in 2016, I hit that point, and so I ended up quitting my job to focus on YouTube full time, because one thing I knew for sure was that not only was the cubicle job depressing, but doing both of them at the same time was like killing me. Like I was absolutely miserable from like ages like 24 to 26. It was probably some of the worst parts of my life, and that I was doing so much stuff all the time, always working on stuff. Like I used to wake up in the morning, set my videos to upload, then go to work for 4 hours, then come home during my lunch break to then set the thumbnails for the videos that I uploaded that morning, and then set them to go live so that there would be videos that day, because I was like down to the wire on making the videos go up each day. But also you couldn't set thumbnails while the video was uploading back then, or in advance really. So like you had to just set them, the uploads, the thumbnails last minute. It was just a chaotic logistical nightmare. then go back to work to keep working for the rest of the day, and then come home and then record videos. And then I would record those videos all afternoon, edit them in the evening, set them to render and overnight, struggle to sleep because my computer is hot and is in the room next to my bed, and then in the morning upload those videos, go to work, come home during lunch to set them to go live. Like, it was just looping. Like, I was literally always doing one of the two jobs, and I was literally interlacing the two jobs with each other, which is not a great way to live. But it was this grappling between like this thing that I had to do because it was my life and my living and what was supposed to be my future, and this other thing that I just like had been doing for a few years now, and I found fulfilling on some level, and I wasn't willing to let go of, even though I now had a job, which I didn't have when I started doing that, because I started YouTube in college and then had a year or so where I was unemployed after college and hadn't found anything at all, and that's when it kind of like took off more, and like it's just it was a tension that had to be resolved. But it happened ultimately when I quit my job in 2016, and the first I made the mistake of not like recording the exact day I quit my job as being like the starting point of me being a full-time YouTuber. So I can't really think of the anniversary of that specifically, but my first memory that I have attached to quitting my job and like being somebody that has this whole self-employed thing going on was specifically the fact that I just realized like, oh yeah, I can just go to the movies in the middle of the day whenever I want to, I guess. And so I went and the first movie I saw as a self-employed YouTuber was Zootopia. So that's like the one milestone, the one thing where I can look up Zootopia's release date and estimate vaguely when I started being a full-time YouTuber and so on. And it was a solid movie. It was cool seeing high effort, very well animated furry stuff going on, obviously. And it's just very obvious that furries worked on this movie. Just like how it's really obvious that furries worked on Puss in Boots and the bad guys. And that's a lot of fun. It's not the most amazing furry vibe because obviously there's such a heavy cop presence in this movie that gives it a very particular vibe. It's also just like a strange movie. Like it's stuck in that like post Frozen era where every Disney movie needs to have a twist villain, which I don't know if anyone likes that. Like, I think it might work specifically in Frozen, because if I remember correctly, Frozen kind of didn't have a main antagonist, so having an antagonist show up may not work on some level. In Frozen 2's case, it's like, well, sorry, not Frozen. In Zootopia's case, it's like, it is a conspiracy. You're there trying to solve a mystery, so like there's gonna be some kind of reveal about who the person is, but the emphasis on it being a big twist each time who the villain is has come up so much that I feel like that kind of I don't know. I feel like a lot of people didn't love the execution of the villain in Zootopia, and there's also some distracting elements like what appears to be an extended Breaking Bad joke, like the two sheep that are making drugs, but in the form of this like I think it was called the nightshade or something like that, the berries that make predators go crazy. That seems to be an extended Breaking Bad joke, which was already kind of dated by the time the movie came out, but also it's just like a weird reference given how adult Breaking Bad is to make in a family sort of children's show. I know there's like elements of that, like Animaniacs and so on, but I don't know, like as somebody who sees a lot of movie references happen in movies like these, that specifically just felt like a really weird one to pick, because I definitely felt like that's what they were going for, given that the similar suits are used for the arc of Breaking Bad where they're in Gus's bunker and so on. But yeah, like I remember liking Zootopia, just thinking it was kind of uneven and weird at times. At the time, there was a moment when I was watching it in theaters where I really thought, damn, they're really doing this, when they have Judy Hopps kind of give her little heroic press conference, and she like says all of the worst things right in front of Nick, and you see how it hits him, and you see like, oh, they are tackling race in a children's movie in a fairly interesting way. Like, I'm sure that it's been criticized back and forth in a million ways because it's the discussion of race, and it probably wasn't done in the most nuanced and complicated way. But like for a children's film, like it was like a pretty like, oh, you see this phrasing that she uses, and you see the immediate consequences of the toll it takes on him, and it's like that was really interesting seeing that play out. And I remember crying in the theater during the tunnel scene where they come together again, specifically the moment where he plays the dumb line, the line about being a stupid rabbit back at her, and that's kind of the beginning of the reconciliation and so on, which is like this perfect combination of like sadness, of like a sad thing leading to sincerity, but in the form of a little joke that's like that specific confused emotion that like can really hit me sometimes. And I did wonder sometimes if it was like if I was crying specifically because of the movie being good, or if it was because I'm just like kind of realizing that I'm just like watching a pretty good furry movie in the middle of the day, and having a good time instead of being miserable at my job like I had been every day for the last year or so. So like that was a cathartic sort of moment when I was watching that film, and I've watched it a couple times since, and it's decent. I've watched Zootopia Plus, the Disney Plus series. It's not great. I don't get much out of it. It's a bunch of really small vignettes, and in an anthology that are just kind of catching up on the various side characters of Zootopia, and they're straight up different genres of short from one to the other. And some of them are stylistically fun. Some of them I get like nothing out of at all. And it infamously has the queer baiting. They just did queer baiting. They just straight up hit us with the idea of Clawhauser and Bogo dancing together for Shakira. I think it's Shakira is the one that plays Gazelle. And like, it's very, very homoerotic in elements of how it's presented. And Clawhauser in particular just does seem to be gay in how he's acted throughout the entire series. And so it feels like it's just genuine queer baiting, it feels like, with Clawhauser and Bogo to put them together like that. And then be like, oh, it was all just a dream. Ha ha ha. It's like, oh. See, the part where it's just a dream feels like it's them feeling the need to walk it back. Like, oh, well, no, those events couldn't have actually happened. Like they could have happened in the events of the story because it's completely within the normal realistic. It's like it's realistic for the standards of Zootopia, what can happen in a storyline, but they bizarrely needed to make it not canon, the things that happen, which is a thing that they never do about anything else, really. And that just seemed like a weird, shitty thing to do. And I think like I think I followed the one of the visual directors on Blue Sky, who just actually is definitely is a furry. And I think he even straight up said like he wanted to have them kiss. And I'm like, if you did that and then said it and then also showed it still be a dream and not just having it be real, like that's so frustrating. And there was a tiny hint of that in this movie too. In Zootopia 2, there are these two, I think they were goats there in Lederhosen, and they're like an old couple. It's the joke is that one of them has a walking stick or a cane. The other one has like a full-on walker, like that whole like two-handed like thing with wheels, but they're like hopping around the mountain everywhere. So it's like they're using old people mobility aids, but they're also like mountain goats that are comically mobile. So it's not necessarily a coherent joke, but they're doing a joke there. And there's a bit where Nick Wilde briefly seems to see a picture of the two of them kissing right before he falls in a hole. And I'm like, are they doing the first queer Disney character again? Are they really like those two mountain goats kind of gay? And then, but like not quite acknowledge it, not quite confirm it. And then he falls in a hole and I'm like, huh. Okay, sure, whatever. We're just gonna keep doing this. But anyway, to talk about Zootopia 2 itself, uh, it's been curious. One, I actually maybe have a little more ground to lay here. Uh, a thing that I found interesting to look back on about Zootopia 1 was that it is like this weird propaganda-ish story, which people get pushback on, obviously, but like it's a story about somebody wanting to become the police. And I found it interesting that one of Judy's first things that she does on the force is that she endangers a ton of people in a police chase, because she goes through the tiny rodent town chasing after the weasel guy and almost kills a ton of people. When all she's doing is chasing after a thief. So it's like, okay, is it worth using force to stop a thief, like a petty thief, especially when said force becomes like a police chase, which in this story is dangerous, but also in real life, police chases are really dangerous. I think actually John Oliver on Last Week Tonight just did a video about police chases recently, if I remember correctly, or I got an old video suggested to me. But like we already knew that. It's big cars careening through civilization, and at any point, anyone involved could have an accident where they crash and die, or they just hit a bystander and kill them, and so on. And in a similar way, Judy immediately in Zootopia 1 endangers so many people and almost kills so many little rodent people. Thankfully gets through without actually killing them, and obviously because it's a Disney film. But you're like, I pointed this out, I think in the Beastars video or something, where I was like, it almost feels like a commentary on the police, that you'd be like if you with some a little self-awareness, you would notice that like aren't the police in this situation endangering people more than they're actually helping them. And then you have the fact that there's overt bigotry within the police force, and that's the basis of the story, is the asymmetrical enforcement of the law and the surveilling of predator species and so on. And Nick and Judy experience opposite ends of that for different reasons. Judy is just seen as being insufficient as a person, whereas Nick is straight up seen as being an antagonistic person because of how he was born, and he had to grow up in that, and he has to live with that now. And that's the crux of why Judy and Nick have that conflict near the end of the film, where they almost split up and everything. But it's also just like a fundamental thing about their society. So it's a little weird to have the movie kind of end with them solving racism, although kids movies always end with you solving racism somehow. Like, just see, you thought racism was real, but actually it was these stupid berries, so you were actually technically incorrect about why you were racist. I'm like, that's a bungled racism metaphor, because that's not really how racism works. You can't factually prove racism wrong, because racism isn't really based on facts to begin with. You can't really you always hear the argument, like, you can't reason somebody out of an argument they didn't reason themselves into. When people give fact-based claims to support their racism, that's not the basis of their racism. It's just a thing that they're presenting as an excuse or justification. But you can't defeat the racism by defeating those claims, because those claims were never the point. They're, if anything, a tool to use argumentatively. So it's a little weird to defeat racism here. It's a little weird that it was just a mechanism all along. I remember specifically game theory compared it to like the crack cocaine in black communities, and talking about, like, I think it was like Nixon's war on drugs and everything, which was a wild video for film theory and game theory and so on to put out. But that was kind of what they were touching on overall. But it's always really weird when you have a force that that's prejudiced against a particular group or person, and then the story just kind of ends with that person becoming a cop. Is always a weird vibe. I've thought about this too with like the Harry Potter films are so obsessed with people becoming cops or becoming government workers all the time. So like it's really weird that the end of the entire arc of like Rowling just thought like, oh, the best thing to do with Harry Potter as a hero is to make him a police officer at the end of the story, like a wizard cop. Like, that's where this was always going. Is that where his arc was going, or is that just like a weird like because we are in this headspace of cop being inescapably good in our brain, we just it's kind of just seen as a weird default for heroes in modern society, is that there's going to be some kind of cop force in society, and the hero's ultimate good ending is just to become a cop, because that's just that's the unquestioned good of that part of society. Like, it's just something that could definitely be unpacked. And what I found interesting is specifically between these two Zootopia movies, both bad guys movies came out much more recently, like almost back to back, because they didn't take a decade to make a sequel. Bad Guys 1 and 2 are really solid films, stylistically great. But what really hit me was the fact that when I went to the theater to see Bad Guys 2, the sequel to a movie about thieves who kind of turn good at the end, is that this one opens. It opened with a trailer for Zootopia 2. I'm like, oh yeah, check it out. Nick and Judy as cops, followed immediately by the Bad Guys 2 starting, and it's like, oh, here's Mr. Wolf and all these cool characters in a police chase as criminals. Like, they're stealing a big thing, and all these police are chasing them. And that was actually a prequel to the original film, because they reformed at the end, and then they go flash forward to like what their lives are like now. And in that movie, they are to blame, not to blame. They're being that they're seeing how quickly the trust that how flimsy the trust is that they've earned with despite their good deeds. They see how hard it is to do good as an ex-felon, basically, and how hard it is to get society to give you another chance, and how little people believe in rehabilitation versus just punishment. Like, it's a really compelling sequel to the previous setup in that way. So it's a really cool idea, and it's really damning towards the police force and so on for how they treat these people that are genuinely trying to do good and are not up to anything, and they're just putting the work in. But every step of the way, it's just so obviously easier for these people to just relapse into crime than it is for them to actually commit to going in the straight and narrow, because nobody actually believes in them, and nobody actually will believe them when they're doing the right thing, even after they were the hero's last movie and everything. And that was a really interesting line to walk for the sequel. Zootopia 2 is kind of the same movie, but kind of worse in some ways, down to the point where, like, yes, Mr. Wolf and Nick Wilde are very nearly the same character in all four of these movies in a lot of ways, but in different contexts. But they're both similarly, like, smarmy and cocksure and infuriating to interact with as a person, I'm sure. But that just leads to furries being incredibly into them. But here we're dealing with the story of the reformed ex-criminal that nobody really trusts, trying to just make it as what now being this police officer, and trying to just work within the system and do well there. But they kind of defang that, because we just had the story be done in a more interesting way with Bad Guys 2, and here in Zootopia, it's literally just, can a fox and a rabbit really work together while also doing an additional dose of not really taking Judy seriously anyway, so that they're no longer really particularly addressing the idea that a fox specifically can't be in the police force, because they're not really being specifically racist anymore. Now it's about how they're different from each other. Like, is the word miscegenation, I think? Like, it's almost like the word, like, it's almost just like the idea that people can't mix specifically. So you see the other the rest of the police force is apparently exclusively pairs of people that work as partners, and they're all the same species as each other, and they're all super similar to each other, to the point where two of them are just called the Zebros, and they just constantly are having a great time over the fact that they're both zebras, which is weird because every other single pair is also a pair of guys that are the same group, but they specifically act like they're unique for being the two zebras. It's strange, but there's like two hippos, two zebras, two rams or bighorn sheep or something, and so on. And they just don't believe that Nick and Judy can function as a team because they're too different, as if these people that are the same species also have the same personalities and so on. So it's really unclear because like it's seemingly because their personalities and not their species, but it's represented by them being two different species, which is a pretty furry thing to do, is have personality and species tied in a way. But here it's getting really mixed up because they keep changing their metaphors movie to movie of what these kind of things even represent in the first place. But also, Nick and Judy just kind of aren't that established as being dysfunctional. If anything, it's pretty much just Judy is the rough thing about this introduction, is that Judy is just kind of a terrible partner, and Nick is, as far as I could see, was mostly just going along for the ride and helping out and sometimes offering an idea and taking the lead a little bit. But like every actual problem that comes out seems to be that Judy just keeps rushing ahead and being impulsive, which is the opposite of what you kind of expect with these two, given that one of them's the country girl and one of them's like the ex-con, but it is actually the ex-con that's like the voice of reason and the slow-moving person, and the country girl's the one that which cannot chill for a second and just think before she does something. So she keeps catastrophically fucking up, which is a little interesting because like she creates the same problem she made at the beginning of the first movie, which is like she in that movie almost killed a bunch of people in Rodent Town, and here she managed to in a somewhat contrived chase lead to a situation where they're chasing after a driver who has also been knocked unconscious and is going to plow directly into a parade of people. Once again, Judy Hopps' behavior is leading directly to so many people being about to die. And Nick just gets the short end of the stick here and also gets the blame. But he does not have a consistent habit of endangering dozens of people to catch one perp who themselves is seemingly just a thief. That keeps happening. So once again, the police force is about to kill so many people just to catch a thief in it because because they prioritize catching the bad guy in a way where they don't weigh the danger they're causing versus the actual thing that the bad guy did in the first place being even worth it, like worth that risk. Because there's a genuine thing, there's a real life thing and a fiction thing of like, is it actually worth it to do a police chase when the crime isn't big enough? Like, if they aren't a murderer, then is it worth chasing them when you might kill somebody in the process? And the thing is that in real life, the police just don't take responsibility for it. So this is not a moral concern for them. They genuinely just don't consider it most of the time, which is upsetting because they need to, because that's how cars work. But here it is a funny little thing because it's a realization like, oh, right. Ha ha ha. Oh, Judy spent the last movie learning how to not do microaggressions and stuff. She didn't really learn how to not do the thing she did at the beginning of the first movie that was bad. So she just does it again. Because technically that wasn't her arc. It makes sense. Like she didn't actually learn not to do what she did in Rodent Town. So it does kind of make sense she would start this movie by redoing that thing. Like they are correctly identifying a character flaw of hers that already exists and returning to it, I guess. But what's confusing about the writing is that it insists that this isn't just like a specific disciplinary problem with Judy, but very specifically a problem where Judy and Nick are too different from each other to work together. And it's like, that's not what I got from those scenes. That's not what I got from those scenes at all. No. But it kind of keeps happening throughout the movie. They keep reinforcing the idea that the two of them can't work together, supposedly, even though it's mostly just continuously Judy problems, basically. And Nick is almost never directly at fault, or he's something happens to him kind of but via happenstance that isn't even particularly his fault or fair to him. And is often just him being in a situation that Judy put him in 5 minutes ago, and now it's having consequences at him, basically. It keeps happening to the point where at one point, Judy has to make a choice to either continue the case or return to Nick. Is seemingly the choice that is presented by the story, but then Judy just gets hit by a sleeping dart, and the choice is made for her, and she abandons Nick, but not in a way where she actually had to be guilty of that, which is weird in its own right, because that felt like it should have been a choice, because it felt like that's what the movie was about. But instead, they removed the choice from her by having her just get knocked out by happenstance, and then the two of them are separated by a literal rift in a way that isn't really much of a character decision, although it is a metaphor, I guess, a rift. But this is a story that tells us that what is it? The movie starts off with them after their first mishap. They immediately are like, we need to redeem ourselves, or specifically Judy thinks that she can redeem them by cracking open the case that only she is noticing, which is that there seems to be a snake, and snakes haven't been in Zootopia for 100 years. So we're done with predator racism, but we are just doing racism again. But this time it's reptiles. Reptiles receive the racism. And there's apparently like a hierarchy of a speciesism, where it's like water mammals are seen as lesser than land mammals, and reptiles are like banished, basically, which is a lot to unpack and bolt onto the existing setting. But when they infiltrate this party and they catch that the reptile is trying to steal something, it quickly becomes apparent, in part because he's voiced by the guy from Everything Everywhere All at Once and Loki and so on. I think he was from the Goonies originally, right? He's voiced by that guy, and so immediately like, oh no, is he a good guy? And immediately they're just all sold on the idea that he's a good guy, but they get framed for attacking the chief, for attacking Bogo and attacking like this rich socialite and so on, and being in league with the snake. So it immediately becomes this like two-pronged thing. They're trying to chase after the snake to figure out what's going on in the story, while trying to unravel the mystery, while also being chased by each of these gimmicky pairs of partners that are in the police force that are all hunting them for trying to kill the chief of police. And it's just it gets out of hand very quickly. Reassessing how much I want to like summarize plot versus talk about specific things here. The first half of the movie is a bit rough. It is so dense with references and jokes and visual gags and frames, like movie frames that where the shot has like way too many characters and gags happening at once across the screen. There's a sense that the movie lacks a certain restraint, and also has maybe either been hastily written or rewritten multiple times. And so there's like a bunch of like blink and you miss it setups that have to pay off later that seem to be like, it feels like the movie was like really edited down and more was cut or something, but certain things had to stay in. And so they're kind of clunkily jammed end to end so they can pay off later. Like there's a grudge that Gazelle has against a specific cop because they get bumped into, like one of the cops bumps into one of Gazelle's tiger dancers at the ice party, and she's like, I'll remember this. And then at the end of the movie, that exact cop comes into Gazelle's tent with all the tiger dancers, and they all kick their ass, which is an interesting, just overt like violence against the police is an interesting thing to include in the movie. Did not expect that. But it's also like what the grudge was that they got bumped into, basically. Like, it's like, I don't really feel like that was established well. And there's like a dozen of those little details that like set up exactly once in a very brief 5-second or 3-second shot, and then come up way later. And it's like, there's like too many moving parts they felt like they needed to keep, and too many weird little gags, some really, really unfunny stuff mixed in with some genuinely decent jokes here and there. But a lot of it's just way too fast. Like, there's a part where Nick wants a soda from a machine, and so he puts the money in, he puts the numbers in, the soda is supposed to come down, but it gets stuck. So he pushes a button, and a little rodent comes out. There's a rodent that just works in the machine, and when somebody presses the button, he has to get up and like unstick the thing that somebody bought when it gets stuck. That's his whole job, apparently. But that part's fine, because that's paced in a way, it's just like a background detail during their conversation, because they're talking about something else, and you're like, oh, that's okay. But then Nick goes to but then Nick picks up the soda, and it's huge compared to his body because we were reminded that the fox and the rabbit are small in this society's terms. So this is a really big looking soda. He then throws the soda at Judy, but her hands are full, and it shoots through the wall. And you're like, how the fuck did a soda go through drywall and out the other side? That's wild. But you see that it landed in a tiny little computer lab where little rodents are working in that tiny little room on their little computers, and they are doing research for later. Or I don't know why I said research for later. They're doing computer work. It's a computer place. It's an office. So this giant soda is right next to this tiny rodent who's like, you threw a soda at me. And it's like bigger than him, and it's like as if a meteor had landed in your office but didn't blow it up. So it's like, that's a wild visual. And which is right when you're adjusting that, the soda then opens and a geyser of drink blasts that gerbil across the room and disintegrates them practically. Like, they're just gone, and you're like, oh. And I'm like, that was too much. Somewhere along the line, that scene was too much, and it happened too fast. And there was too many things going on. It doesn't really land as a joke. It's just a kind of sensory overload at some point. And I'm just like, one, I feel like it'd be clean if you just stop at the little guy in the vending machine and you're just like, yeah, there's this little guy whose job is to do that thing. It's a bit like how there was blink and you miss it moments in Zootopia 1 where they had a smoothie shop and they were handing people smoothies that bought them, but then had a little chute that would send the smoothie up into the air, and it could be received by tall mammals like the giraffe and so on. You're like, oh, look at that. So like seeing the little guy working in the vending machine doesn't make that much sense, but sure, it's a funny little gag that he works in there. But then escalating to throwing it through a wall, and then fucking with that one random little gerbil, and then specifically the part where it blasts him across the room, that level of escalation, there's too many levels of escalation back to back that the joke just gets lost along the way. And I just start feeling tired watching the movie at some point while some of these things are playing out. And maybe that was really funny to somebody. Like, I'm not going to discount that idea, but I'm like, there's enough scenes like that in the first half of this movie specifically that keep doing that. And it's kind of because the first half of the movie is really dense with like Zootopian civilization, and the second half of the movie is more of an adventure film with way few characters on screen, and there's just less room for this chaotic stuff to be happening all the time. But I'm like, that's a good example of a scene that just does not land, but they like it. And I know they like it because it's the trailer for the movie. So like, they really like that scene because they show the whole scene in the trailer. Specifically, they don't show the guy in the vending machine. They show the part where the guy gets blasted. And like, that's the part that they're proud of, I guess, enough to put in the trailer, or whoever made the trailer anyway. And it's like, I would have cut that. I would have cut that scene sooner. I would have cut that joke at least, and just have Nick get a drink and just have it be a funny, cute detail what's having in the vending machine. But later in the movie, Clawhauser has to use that tiny little gerbil's computer. And it admittedly is a funnier joke about the tiny gerbil, how easily Clawhauser fucks things up in a little slapstick thing where he loses the gerbil into like a donut box, and immediately, oh, well, I guess I'm doing this now. And there's little computer guys going on. Those are odd in their own way, and that Clawhauser isn't in the movie until the end of the film. So the fact that he's not set up at any point in the film, and you're supposed to just remember him from the previous movie, is kind of a sloppy screenplay to me. Like, I don't think he shows up until the end of the film. And at that point, it's like, you should just not have him be in this film. Like, having him suddenly do plot important things when you haven't seen him before is really weird screenwriting, as far as I can tell. But they made that part too important, and they might have chosen to cut other Clawhauser things from earlier, so he's no longer a setup. But the earlier joke for the gerbil has to be there, because if you don't have the joke about the tiny gerbil at the beginning of the thing getting blasted, which is, then you don't leave that joke in, then you don't know he exists. And so when you then have we're dealing with this tiny computer later in the story, then it wouldn't be set up correctly. So you're kind of like stuck with that tiny joke, but the joke doesn't really work. It's like, there's a lot of like little things that are just kind of really packed in there like that. I found most of the movie kind of up until kind of like up to and through the swamp scene mostly exhausting. The actual party that they infiltrate was pretty all right. The ice party for the lynxes is like a decent scene overall. But everything before that and after that, up to including the bayou scenes, are a lot of like really exhausting jokes and stuff just coming too quickly. They encounter the shrew mafia again, and like I can't even tell what the joke is sometimes. Like they're reacting in increasingly strange ways, and it's just like it's the energy is just coming at me. And like there's a part where the beaver is interacting with like a walrus, and they just keep saying bub at each other, but it goes on for a long time, and I don't quite get what the joke is going. And then they escalate the joke by having a whole series of walruses that all make the same bub joke at the same time. And it's like, I miss the restraint of just like letting us just sit in the sloth scene for a bit at the DMV last movie by comparison at this point, because I'm like, this is just a lot of energy coming at me at once. And I could use it. Could really use it just a chill down. But the midpoint of the movie, Nick and Judy are finally in a more direct way actually feuding in a way that does make sense. It's like the moment they hop down the red line tube, this movie suddenly kind of comes together going forward. And I guess we're getting into spoilers at this point. If it wasn't clear, I'm just going to talk about whatever the fuck I feel like, but we're getting to like later parts of the movie here. It does get better, and the movie did get me to cry again. But we're going to continue on to that. I guess that's the shape of this ramble. But there's a specific part where they're very inorganically warned, don't go on the red line, you'll drown, like 1 second before they hop in the red line and start to drown. Because that's just kind of the jumbled screenplay that this one kind of has a lot of the time in the first half. But specifically, Nick is chasing after Judy while Judy is chasing after the case. Like Judy is very much self-destructing in order to prove herself, and Nick is risking himself just because he cares about Judy. And that's a very clear dynamic that's happening. And ultimately, Nick pulls Judy out, and like through one of the emergency hatches that leads to them losing the trail of the person that they're chasing through the tubes, these water tubes, because they need to breathe. And he saves her when she's going too far. And so he has the restraint to actually realize that they're just endangering themselves. They're not going to succeed. And after they're recovering, he's like, I think he does hint, like, I think that he thinks that apologies are in order. And then she implies that he's the one that should be apologizing because they lost the trail for the case. And it's like, you both almost died, and Nick saved you both. And he's just like he just wants an acknowledgement of the fact that this is going too far and you're genuinely in danger here. And she just doesn't see that. And they have to like climb this mountain, and they're just feuding the whole way through. And it's symbolized by them dropping the little carrot recorder from the previous movie that they keep, which they've already reinforced exists like several times now. And they use it they specifically use it as a physical manifestation of their partnership, and also the fact that they solved the first case because they used that in order to catch the bad guy at the end. They drop it and it shatters, and it's like a sad moment where like there's no more dialogue for a while, and they're just continuing on, and they're not really interacting anymore. And you're like, oh my god, this is actually a sad thing where like they both are upset that this thing happened, and neither of them are really willing to talk about it and confront it and say where it's going. And there's a genuine fracturing of their relationship going forward in a way that you actually do feel. And suddenly the movie gets really real in its execution, when it was just kind of being aggravating so far. And you're like, oh wait, no, I care about Nick and Judy, and this is sad that they're genuinely like not they're not having a big dramatic like misunderstanding fight like you have in a lot of kids movies where this person has a misconception about the other person because they walk in at the wrong moment, and you have a cheat misunderstanding. They're just sincerely and organically not meshing over this thing. And it's over Judy's obsession. She's obsessed with going forward, and Nick just sees that she's going to get herself killed, and also is upset that he himself is kind of being put in danger because he cares enough about her to not want her to die, and not wanting to die with her either, but also not obviously not being able to stop himself from going along and trying to stop her or protect her and so on. If you can't tell, I'm kind of on Nick's side on this whole thing. Like, honestly, it's like, yeah, like I know that narratively, and I know this while I'm watching the movie, that it's going to ultimately kind of prove Judy right, probably, because I don't know, it would almost be too mature to actually have the movie end in a way where Nick was right and Judy should have walked it back. And on some level, like the idea of like not committing to justice or the right thing happening, especially in a situation like this where it's genuine bigotry against the reptiles and a conspiracy against them, like it's bad to not solve that, but it's also not necessarily a good idea to put that on yourself and continually almost die for a thing you found out about 5 hours ago, and is going to actively kill you and involves you jumping into things that just promise to kill you, but then getting lucky and surviving, usually because Nick's saving you. It's like it's just incredibly self-destructive behavior. It's terrifying. So I'm mostly on Nick's side. It's because it's not like Nick's like pro the bad thing. It's just like, gotta be better than this in your approach to things and not rely purely on plot armor to get through your life. But then they do get completely separated, and Judy ends up with the people that are like actively uncovering the conspiracy, and Nick ends up in prison on her behalf. But it's right after she just said that he doesn't think the case is worth dying for. And the movie treats this like a failure, then clarifies that what he means is it's not worth her dying for. Like, he doesn't want to see her die for this case. And it's kind of a additional clarification and emotional earnestness that goes on to reveal the real reason why he's so fixated on this is like he's so afraid of losing her specifically because she's the only person that he has, really, which is honest and real. Like that's cool. It's surprisingly earnest as it goes on too. But what really gets me is that there's a part where the villain, in a really honestly bad scene, there's a part where Judy is poisoned and the snake is with Judy, but there's an entire team of cops attacking the snake who's carrying Judy in a tiny room somewhere downstairs. And upstairs, the villain and Nick are on a precarious ledge and they're fighting because the villain's trying to poison Nick now. But the villain also has the anti-venom because he also stole that from the snake, because the venom specifically is based on snake venom, I guess. And the snake had a cure for his own venom on him at all times, like an EpiPen, which I guess is responsible, makes sense. But the villain then chooses to specifically steal that and take it with him. So when he's trying to kill Nick and doing a really bad job, because he weirdly reveals he's a villain to Nick, because Nick has no way of even knowing who this guy is or that he's a villain yet. He just shows Nick that he's a villain. Like, I'm gonna get you, even though the whole reason he's been successful so far is actually sneaking attacking people because they thought they were on his side. So that's already really messy plot right there. This is why part of the reason why the movie feels so rewritten or hastily done. I'm like, why is the villain reveal that he's a villain to Nick when his entire strategy is to surprise people and act innocent? But they're all fighting down there in that other room. Like, down there is Snake, Judy, and all of the police at once, apparently. And the villain and Nick are fighting on this precarious ledge that's cracking and it's going to fall down. It's all in the ice. And the villain is suddenly choking out Nick on a ledge where Nick is in the middle of dealing with the villain already, but also is able to look down off the ledge to see the snake, who pokes his head out the window to yell at him that Judy is poisoned and they need the antidote that's on the villain. So Nick is threatened, but also so unthreatened that he can simultaneously see what's happening down there, get a full explanation of it, even though it's an interior room, but the snake pokes his head out the doorway to yell up at Nick on a different floor, which Nick can see and hear somehow, while also putting together that what the antidote is, and without having ever seen it before, that the villain has, and like somehow the snake knows that Nick and the villain are up there, even though like that's not how ledges work. Like, like if he's down there somewhere, a ledge is like a 90-degree angle cut off thing. So if they're up here, there's no visibility there. Like the snake can't see shit. There's no reason the snake would know what's happening up there or what's going on or see who's doing what with what. Okay, rewind that. I think there's cameras in the room, so he might be able to see them from there. So let's not drop that part. That part's not important. It's just a silly nitpick, but it's like it just feels like a really weird, messy scene that Nick can somehow be so threatened he's getting his ass beat by this lynx, but also be able to just like casually receive intel from over here from completely different people in a different location, while also being able to notice the antivenom and then recover from this thing and then use that against them. And then he does like ultimately defeat the villain, grab the antidote, throw it down to the snake. The snake jabs Judy with the antivenom. Then Judy instantly recovers from the antivenom like it's adrenaline. And then Judy takes out every police officer in 2 seconds, despite the fact that she is tiny, and that's not how this has worked so far. And also, these people have been the threat this entire story so far and continue to be afterwards. What do you mean she can just like kick and then just like take them all out in 2 seconds? Like that kind of invalidates the entire chase that's happening in the story. What? Then she immediately is up top and she catches Nick from the fall that he's having upstairs. But also it's blink and you miss it, but you can see that in the catch, the snake's also involved in the mechanics of catching Nick, even though Judy and the snake were both downstairs. Judy was just unconscious from venom 1 second ago, and also didn't seem to take the snake with her during the action of her escaping upstairs to catch Nick in the first place. So there's just like weird shot-to-shot continuity that doesn't seem to add up, or goes so quickly that it doesn't communicate very well what's happening. Like it just feels really clumsy throughout this whole thing. So that's one reason why this is the worst scene in the movie. But the other part is what really got me was that the fucking lynx says the line, because like Nick's gonna go for the cure, which slid to the edge of the cliff, but the cliff is on a shelf where the lynx and Nick are both on, and it's gonna break and fall if he stresses it by going down there. He then runs over there. Nick's gonna go for it, obviously, because it's gonna cure Judy, because of the intel he somehow just got from that really weirdly framed shot, really weirdly set up scene. The lynx says it's not worth dying for, and I'm like, you're using the villain to echo Nick's words back at him. But Nick's right. Like, what do you mean? Like, this isn't a character flaw that Nick has to overcome, I don't think. There's definitely something going on with his relationship with Judy that like he does have character growth to do, and he does a version of that by the end. But using those words specifically against him, like he should feel bad for saying them just because they made Judy upset earlier, is wild. Like, it's already rough that feels guilty for upsetting Judy earlier, but I'm like, he did genuinely have to save her from drowning in the tube, and she's repeatedly endangering everyone around her and herself in this pursuit, because she does this as recklessly as possible and tries to shoulder the entire world on herself. So he's kind of right. So it's really weird that the lynx uses his words against him in this big emotional scene. And then Nick's character moment is to be the one that then is against the guy who says it's not worth dying for, which is wild. Also, the stakes of dying aren't really a thing, because like not only does all that happen and then that sacrifice is kind of made, but then yes, the snake and Judy teleport upstairs magically and catch him mid-fall, even though he was falling from up there on a different floor. The lynx does dramatically fall to his death in a way that looks like Mufasa's death scene. But then he's fine and he just walks away. So there wasn't really a risk anyway, because snow is big, which we kind of knew earlier, because they jump out a window at the beginning of the movie into the snow, and they just survived that one too. Just a weird scene where just like the emotion of it is weird. The idea that it's a character moment is like framed strangely and morally weird, but also just the logistics of the action are so insane to unpack that I'm like, there had to be a better way to contrive this scene. There just had to be a cleaner way to establish this part of the story, and the way that they did it is just kind of wild. It's just very strange. It feels like they're using like old drafts of like there's like remnants of old drafts of how they wanted the story to go, and they're just like Frankensteining some of them together, and it ended up in being this scene somehow. Very strange. I navigated that weirdly because I started talking about that, meaning to talk about the how it's a weird character moment for Nick, but then I got really lost in the logistics of how weird that scene is, and then had to like wrap back around to my original point by the end. There's also some of the most spoilers, I guess, is just the fact that like they do the villain twist again, which infamously is a thing that their movies have been doing for a while now, is that they really like to have a surprise villain at the end of each movie. That it's frequently like one of the guys you thought was good is actually bad, is basically the villain most of the time. Like, you know, it's like the guy from Frozen, essentially. And they do it again, but they do a fake out on who it is this time, to the point where they're literally saying out loud that, oh yeah, last time our thing had our case had a bit of a twist. And then he's like, I know. And then he stabs her because he is the twist. And it's like, they did it. Not only do they still do the same twist that they do every movie to the point where it's predictable and you can see it coming, but they lampshaded it. Like, they acknowledged the fact that it keeps happening, but they still did it. And it's like, it's so on the nose that like, I literally, at the beginning of the movie, when you meet the Lynx, I immediately thought, oh, he's the villain. I didn't know what the plot was yet. I didn't know what the plot of the movie was yet, or what the conspiracy was about, or anything about reptiles yet. But just meeting that Lynx, I was like, oh, this is the character. The economy of characters tells me this. They're introducing this character now because he's the twist villain at the end of the movie. And then he was the twist villain at the end of the movie. Okay. Yep. Sure. I guess I saw that coming. But overall, like the scenes between Judy and Nick, both the part where their conflict gets real and the part where they reconcile are both pretty well done, and just like some earnest character writing to put in a kid's movie for people to watch in a way that I think like is very, very neat to see play out. I wish the rest of the movie was similarly well done, and also maybe even similarly paced, where it was like just took a moment more often to just like let things land correctly and not being full of so many unrestrained jokes. Speaking of a lack of restraint, the first movie had a number of movie references, but the main ones I remember is there was Breaking Bad with the sheep, and then there was The Godfather, obviously, with the shrew mafioso guy. I need to take a drink. I'm sure there was more, but I don't remember any more of them. But in this one, they won't chill. Like, there's so many references in this one, to the point where it starts to wear you out. Like the big climax takedown at the end of the movie has a "that'll do, pig" joke, like from Babe. They do "that'll do, pig, that'll do," and I'm like, and they just quote it in full and then just move on. Like, during the big takedown of the final boss, basically, I'm like, that's put a lot of emphasis on that movie reference. That's just a reference. There's a lot of there's moments where they're scrolling through Netflix, or it's Disney Plus, I guess, and it's like Disney movie. There's like furry versions of all the Disney movies. We saw a version of this when they were advertising Zootopia by showing furry versions of all the different docket of Marvel movies. Like, they had Deadpool and Wolverine was Deadpool and Dead Mule and Wolverine, which kills me because I'm like, okay, sure, Deadpool's a mule, I guess. I think that's what it was. Wolverine? Wolverine's already an animal. Why would he be Wolverine? That's silly. But like the movie, but like that was like that was like Disney E3 shit. But in this movie, there's a bunch of movie references in the in Disney Plus scrolling, which is slightly weird because I don't know if you should be showing kids that Alien exists in this setting, because Alien is for adults. Not that it's the end of the world, but I'm like, I know there's jokes for adults in family movies. So I'm like, I don't know if you should actively acknowledge the adult media by like directly. There's a part where the weirdly the only Weaselton scene in this entire film is Weaselton selling bootleg DVDs that are all furry versions of Disney sequels, which is, it comes and goes. Weaselton gets a standalone Weaselton gets a call out in the ending sequence where they show all the different people's faces and then who's the actor that played each one. They're like, Alan Tudyk as Weaselton. You know, I'm like, he had a cutaway gag and that's all he had for the whole movie. Like, I think his credit at the end of the movie is longer than his scene in the film. I'm like, was that cut down? Did he have more scenes? He had a whole short that went on for like 5 minutes on Disney Plus in Zootopia Plus, but he's in this movie for 5 seconds, and 3 of those seconds is his credit. It's like, what? Very weird. But what's the other references here? They do The Shining, which is really weird. Like, it's fun the way like that it happened, but also it's like really weird where you're like, the villain is running away across the snow from the mansion, but then they're like, oh, there's a hedge maze here, and I'm like, there's a hedge maze here? His goal isn't in the hedge maze, right? He just is behind the hedge maze, so he's just gonna go around the hedge maze, right? No, he goes into the hedge maze, and I'm like, why is he going through the maze? And then it cuts to his face, and he's doing the Jack Nicholson face from The Shining when he was in the ice, where he looks all crazy. And I'm like, oh, it's a Shining joke. He's actively sabotaging his own plans to do a Shining joke for the audience. And I'm like, it's a cute gag. I don't hate it, but it's in the logic of the movie. It is like a little weird in the moment that like this is happening right now. Like, don't we have better things to do? There is not one, but 2 what does the fox say jokes or references or nods or whatever. There's a part where everyone's making fun of Judy and Nick for being bad partners after the first fuck up. And somebody's like, hey, what's the fox say, dummy? Or something like that. Like an actual verbatim saying the entire reference out loud kind of moment. And then later somebody is... I think Judy is watching the news and changing the channels, and one of them literally is going to like ding 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 or whatever it is, like which is like quoting the music video. What does the fox say? Because it's one of the annoying sounds that the fox said, and I'm like, did the Screaming Goats guy do this? Is this the same person that works at Disney Marvel that put a Screaming Goats joke in Thor 4? And also put Screaming Goats jokes way too much in Wreck-It Ralph 2, which was a terrible movie that was completely full of way too many references and jokes constantly, like lists, and just didn't function as a movie. Like, it was not... I like Wreck-It Ralph 1 a lot, and 2 was despicable. Just not even worth being watched on the plane, which is where I was watching it. Did not enjoy Wreck-It Ralph 2. And I'm like, getting hit by what does the fox say twice in like within 5 minutes in a movie in 2025 is weird. Like, what does the fox say was an old movie that's an old joke to reference by the time Zootopia 1 came out. Like, I want to say that was like 2012, 2013 or something, and Zootopia came out in 2016, a decade ago. So like that would have been an old joke to make then, but maybe then you would have been like, huh, yeah, movies take a while to make, don't they? Zootopia came out a decade ago. It's 2025. We're doing a what does the fox say joke now? But it's not a joke, it's just a reference. Like, if you know what the fox say is, then you're like, ha, he said the thing I know. And I'm like, I don't know if there's genuine comedy in this movie that works, and almost none of it is ever like, do you know what The Godfather is? Do you know what Breaking Bad is? Do you know what this very specific internet meme music video was from 15 years ago? And I'm like, what the fuck? And there's more, I'm pretty sure. I'm sure there's more. I'm pretty sure I remember having a list in my head that was more references that happened in this movie. And I'm kind of like lost them now because I've been rambling for long enough that it's going to reach the length of the movie that I'm ranting about. Overall, weird movie. It's not as bad as I'm making it sound because I'm really explaining in depth some of the things that I found goofy or questionable and so on. Overall, it's like a kind of uneven movie that just feels like it should have been more cleanly executed in its first half, and then the second half is mostly fine and even genuinely emotionally affecting at times. The little beaver is fun. There's a little beaver I didn't really mention, but she's like teased as like a conspiracy theorist in the preceding stuff, and then shows up here, then shows up in joining the party. And I don't even really fully remember how they joined the party. They just go straight from the mafia to Beaver. And I don't fully remember the logical connection there because it kind of just felt like it was coming at you really quickly there, just kind of cycling through the side cast as quickly as you can because there's so many characters in the Zootopia universe that it's kind of comes pre-overbloated. And every single one of them comes back. Like, oh yeah, Hannibal Lecter. Yeah, Silence of the Lambs is one of the references. They're keeping the villain of the previous movie behind a Hannibal Lecter screen. And what gets me here is there's just like a singularity of bad guys in Zootopia making the same jokes and having the same plot beats, but them just being worse in Zootopia. Because the villain from the first Bad Guys is also behind a Hannibal Lecter screen, where it's like other people have iron bars, but this character specifically has like the glass or plastic like sheet that has little circular holes cut in it periodically, like, you know, Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs, the screen that he was standing behind. Both of these sequels make the same joke where the first movie's villain is behind a Hannibal Lecter sheet, and it's like, it's kind of cute in Bad Guys 2, and there's a series of jokes that kind of work for some parts of it, and they also spend more time on it because specifically they execute on the Hannibal Lecter joke because the Mayor Foxington in Bad Guys 2 needs to actually negotiate with him and try to get something out of him. So they are kind of doing a Hannibal Lecter. They're kind of doing a Silence of the Lambs there, where they're trying to work with the previous person as a criminal witness, an expert, to figure out what to do, to how to catch this new guy. But in Zootopia, it serves no purpose. It's just a throwaway gag with zero additional depth, so it's just a reference, and it doesn't even really work as the reference. Like, she's like, do you like my furniture? I made it of my own wool. And then she sinks into her own wool. And then she jumps at the screen, like, and I think she literally says, jump scare. And then they move on. And it's like, what? This is just, it's fun. It's weird. They both make the same jokes, but the fact that one of them, the one that came out first, did such a better job at the same ideas in many cases really hurts Zootopia 2. Because it just leads to a series of scenes that are kind of just annoying to watch. And that's one of those moments where you're like, what? None of that was funny. And I don't care about this character. I didn't really care about her in the first movie either. It's just she was the villain. She turned out to be the villain and they got her. The conspiracy leading up to that was more important than the actual character. Seeing her return isn't interesting. And you don't do anything with her besides just acknowledge that Silence of the Lambs existed 40 years ago or something. Which I think you've filled this movie with enough references and too many gags, to the point where it's like getting in the way of the characterization and plotting of the movie, while also getting so silly that you're like, when you do certain silly jokes like that, like how she behaves in that cell, it's a moment where somebody doesn't behave like a person. Whereas oftentimes people felt like people in the first movie. Like you go to the nudist colony in the first movie, and there's a gag there that they're all naked and they're doing jokes about them being naked and so on. And of course, it's funny to us because they're all Ken dolls and so on. So it's like, there's not much to it. But like, you believe that they're genuinely having some kind of little Zen moment, and like the pacing slows down and just lets that scene exist in its own way. But in this one, you just be like, we're in the middle of something, but we got to interrupt the action to do a Hannibal Lecter joke, but not really a Hannibal Lecter joke because it doesn't resemble Hannibal Lecter beyond the cell that she's in, and the jokes that she's are doing don't make sense, and she doesn't have a reason to be in this movie because she's not important to the plot of the anything. And you're interrupting the action in the scene to do this. It's like, what are we doing? What are we doing? So yeah, I think ultimately this is probably a worse movie than the first one. I wasn't sure what my opinion was before I started talking about it here and kind of working through all the things, but I'm like, yeah, it's just really sloppy. It just feels really sloppy and weird, which is a bummer. But I think I also am in team Zootopia 1 wasn't amazing. I had a cool little moment with it, with the specific moment it existed in my life. And that's why I told the little story just to share, I guess. But it wasn't like a movie I'm enamored with. It's not one of my favorites. It was a fun little fact about furries, if you aren't in the know. Zootopia was the banner image for Fur Affinity, the main, most known furry gallery, I guess, like furry deviant art. For adults only, don't look at it if you're not an adult. It's not really meant for anything else, really. It had custom banner art of the mascots of Fur Affinity combined with Zootopia aesthetics as the banner of the website for like 6 to 8 years straight. It only recently changed to other banners and has returned to its old habit of changing banners constantly when the owner of the website died and it changed management and so on. And now there's been a bunch of new banners since then. There used to be a bunch of new banners done by guest artists all the time. But there was someone drew a Zootopia thing, and that stayed the banner for like 6 years. It was wild. And like furries have mined every inch of Zootopia 1. Every individual scene or premise has spawned not only just a porn comic, but several competing porn comics, like the Nudist Colony, the fucking that panther driver that's like, he's a driver that chases them at the beginning of when they first go to try to investigate him, and they fight in like the trees and so on. Every single character, every single set piece has turned into some kind of spin-off furry comic, and that's not even counting the part with the infamous comic about Nick and Judy having a relationship, and Judy getting an abortion and Nick being mad about that, which is a wildly well-drawn but bizarre comic premise that I don't even know that comes from inside of the furry fandom. I think that might be something else entirely, but I wasn't even thinking about that. But woof. So it's like, I'm curious to see how much ammo people will get from this one, or if people will kind of move on with it, because I don't know if it'll quite have the same moment overall, because I think it's just not as good. And the fact that there's been Puss in Boots 2: The Last Wish and both Bad Guys movies came out from DreamWorks in the last few years, and those three were so solid and gave people so much to chew on, that I don't think this one has the same ability to shake the fandom by being this like rare gem of a thing that they don't normally get, because there's actually been a lot of examples lately. In fact, there was a trailer before this movie for that, I think it was called The Goat, I think is the one that's coming out, where there's it's got that Into the Spider-Verse style animation with a reduced frame rate and stuff, and it looks really stylized and interesting. And I've seen people already fixating on that movie in advance. There was definitely some in the know furry jokes throughout this one. At one point, Nick is wearing a shirt that says Foxy Dad. They did advertising where they just flashed every single character design at you as rapidly as possible. And so many of those characters are barely in the movie. But the fact that they did that was like, oh, okay, they're giving people ammo to do marketing for them by obsessing over all these little characters and so on. Like, I think there was wasn't there like a wolf in a space suit or something in the trailer? I don't remember that character existing in the film, but I think he was in the trailer. He was probably part of the Burning Man sequence, because the movie the final set piece has them at one point running, not the final set piece, but a later set piece of the movie has them running through Burning Man. That's called Burning Mammal. Yeah, Burning Mammal. And there's a billion blink and you miss it characters in the background of that. A lot of people in like bikinis and other forms of less dress, never getting the camera focus on them. And then when the movie's over, you get another Shakira concert that's set back at Burning Mammal, where you get to see people dancing a bit more. And it's like so many of the character designs were either those people or they were the various duos of cops that are chasing after everybody. Yeah. Don't have a clean outro necessarily, but yeah, overall, like, it was like a 6 out of 10, maybe. It was just fine. It's a fine movie. I'm not in a hurry to watch it again. I think I'd sooner watch the bad guys movies again at this point. But there it is. Zootopia 2 is out. I felt weird being a 35-year-old man alone watching this movie in a packed theater full of children and their parents. But at the same time, I'm like, who else is a 10 years later sequel to a movie for than the people that saw the last one? Like, I guess people just take their kids to watch movies that they don't have context for, or maybe they might have like old DVDs of the original one that they got more recently or something. But I don't know. I'm not going to defend. I don't need to defend the idea of watching an animated film. Obviously, it's just like it does always feel weird to watch them in person sometimes, because what the audience usually is. I'm not usually on the dot with this stuff. I like kind of impulsively noticed it just came out and then went to watch it immediately. Usually I'm pretty late to these things. I just don't pay attention to theaters that much, and I often see movies when they're on their way out, and I get to see a lot of films in basically empty theaters, which is pretty nice. I'm going to go ahead and stop talking so I can render this video and get those day one opinions out. Everyone can't wait to hear my opinion specifically with my shitty webcam and my array of Nintendo 64 cartridges in the background. Whoa.